So I would like to welcome you all to the webinar jointly presented by ACU, TimeEdit and DVE, a successful case study of timetabling system implementation. My name's Di Van Eck and good afternoon to you all, or good morning if you're in the UK. I'm the director at DVE Solutions and also been working as a senior consultant in the sector for, I think, far too long, but it's now 28 years. And having a good time doing it too, meeting lots of wonderful people, always trying to improve things. And I'll just allow my panel to introduce themselves. I'll hand over to Danielle.
Hi everyone, Danielle Gardner. I'm the principal consultant for the digital transformation part of DVE. I too have worked in education for a very long time, about 13 years now. But it's a great space to be in. I'm very happy to be on the panel today for this presentation.
Thank you, Danielle. Over to our guest, Catherine Blythe, Dr. Catherine Blythe from ACU.
Hello, everybody. I'm Catherine Blythe, Academic Registrar and Director of Student Administration at Australian Catholic University. I'm based in North Sydney. And so I'm joining you from Gadigal country. Very pleased to be talking to you today about our experience with our new timetabling system.
Thank you, Catherine. And over to TimeEdit, Richie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for setting aside time to join us today. My name is Richie Tay. I'm the Business Development Manager here at TimeEdit. Definitely looking forward to the discussion and your questions as well.
Thank you, Richie. And Joel.
Hi, everyone. Joel Zanoda. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at TimeEdit. I'm not from education, I'm from a SaaS background and enterprise software background. So I guess understanding enterprise challenges and needs and applying software to that.
Thank you, Joel. I will just move on to our welcome to country slide and read that to you. And I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land. I'm sorry, I've just got to, of the land on which we meet today, and all of the lands and where we're meeting online, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. Thank you for joining us. The agenda today is a number of things. It's to address the questions and information requirements that you have sent through to us, but specifically what we're trying to do is to talk through some of the strategies for assessing your organisation's needs for timetabling and preparing for that change program. The importance of having a reliable system for efficient resource management, which I'm sure you're all aware of. Some of the considerations when selecting a provider, some of the tips for smooth implementation, some of the challenges faced during implementation and how to overcome them, some best practices to ensure a smooth transition, and some of the key outcomes that have been achieved and lessons learned. And throughout those objectives, we'll aim to include the bulk of the questions that you sent through to us. But just for everyone's interest, the questions were focused around class transfers, integration pitfalls, cost and time, what problems are aimed to be solved, why TimeEdit, reporting requirements, class preference processes, having additional intakes, getting space optimization, successful implementations with multiple stakeholders, teacher utilisation, who's part of the implementation team, some of the challenges and lessons learned, how to be efficient and what tools to use. So hopefully we've incorporated those elements of your questions into our webinar today. And then we'll have, essentially DVE will speak briefly about our work in the sector and our role in this particular type of project. Then TimeEdit will speak about the system itself and their experience. And then importantly, Catherine will speak about the case study of ACU, where they have implemented TimeEdit in a, I would say, super short time frame. And proudly, you can wear that banner. We will,
I would say that too, Di.
So we will have that information, and then there'll be a Q&A for hopefully at least half an hour. And we can also do follow-ups. And then we have a special offer at the end, so stay till the end for the special offer. Okay, thanks very much for that agenda and the slides, Ina. So what we'll be talking specifically from a DVE perspective is really the work that we do around system implementation, and probably the mantra that I've been speaking about for the 17 years that I've been working at DVE is to have a look at the processes and review the processes before you undertake a system improvement project. And we have a framework that we use at DVE, and we've worked with over 35 universities now and a lot of higher ed providers, and many of you are here today, so thank you for joining us. And with all of those organisations, there is a framework of people, process, structure and technology that we apply to all of our reviews and our report writing to ensure that if there's a change in one area of the university or the higher ed provider or organisation, the other three elements of that change are considered. So if you're going to change the system, you have to think about your people, you have to think about the roles and responsibilities right across the organisation. You have to think about the process and what the current process is, and that ought to be mapped. Mapping the process is really important, and really identifying the roles and responsibilities of all of the stakeholders, anybody who has a touch point with that process. And with timetabling, that's quite vast. It stretches right across the organisation and particularly down into faculty, school, discipline level. And it's important in these projects to get that local area input and buy-in into improvement activities for timetabling, and including academic staff. And the culture of creating timetables is very much based in an academic environment. And so understanding why teaching staff need certain time periods and being able to incorporate their requirements in a sort of considered sense into the project for consideration overall is really important. And then the structure of the organisation takes into account those elements of school discipline area, but also other areas that might be using space, because with time edit, resource management is about space. So there might be other elements that come into it. And then you have the system itself, ultimately, that is designed to meet the needs of the organisation, but also taking on best practice advice from the system experts and also from consultants such as DVE who look at processes all the time. Essentially, you're all here to improve timetabling, make it more efficient, obviously better for staff, but also the ultimate really for why we're all working in this sector is to, I always say, get a student through from A to G. Admissions through to graduation for any one of us providers is the most important thing, and making that a terrific experience is the ultimate aim. So DVE works alongside some specific vendors, and Danielle will speak more about that in detail about how that works, so that we can bring along the people and process side with the technology, the system and the structure side, and create a unique blend of resources that helps for a successful implementation. And that's the experience that we're talking about today to some degree with ACU, but we've also had it with other providers. So essentially, that's really all I wanted to say about the DVE side of things. And I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Danielle, and she'll speak more specifically about our projects. Thanks, Danielle.
Thanks, Di. Thank you, everyone. So, yeah, I guess in addition to bringing that, significant amount of local higher education knowledge and experience to the project from a DVE perspective, our primary role in the implementation of time edit in the ACU context has been project management. And that's really to enable time edit to focus on the solutioning and the implementation of the product. So that's where their expertise are. And so it's really freeing them up to work in that space. So today, what I wanted to talk about was what the project management activities look like. So you can start to paint a bit of a picture about how a partnership between DVE and time edit works in a university setting. Later on in the presentation, Joel will talk about the time edit activities from an implementation and product perspective. So in terms of project management, the first step for us on a project is project initiation activities. And these can include activities such as facilitating project kickoff meetings with key university stakeholders. We also set up a statement of work. So that's a really important document that outlines all of the key information about the project, including scope, implementation methodology, timeframes, the project team, budget, and project controls. And also importantly, the project plan. So this outlines clearly what the project activities and the timeline is for the duration of the project. And then alongside that is ongoing management of the project plan. So DVE is responsible for regularly reviewing that timeline in consultation with the project team and making any adjustments. And so from experience, that's quite a regular occurrence as we work through the project together. What we also deliver on is reporting, and that's in the form of a monthly progress report. And that documents the status of the project, including key upcoming activities, any accomplishments, and risks and issues. From a governance perspective, we chair a monthly steering committee, which is where we table the monthly project progress report, and that's typically held with a project sponsor and key decision makers. And in addition to that, we do have regular meetings with the project manager on the university side, and that's mostly focused on that kind of day-to-day activities and making sure that we're tracking to the plan. So a lot of our responsibility is around oversight and the coordination of project activities, and really key to that is making sure that key milestones and deliverables are being achieved and any blockers are cleared. Managing risks and issues, so they're usually raised via the steering committee, or if a critical risk or issue comes up, then that's directly raised with the project manager and sponsor if that's required. So underpinning those project activities is the day-to-day collaboration between DVE, Timeedit and ACU in this particular example. And that's a really critical component to ensuring that the project remains on track, that the expectations of everyone is really clear. There's usually a bit of problem solving to work through, and then looking at any blockers, risks or issues that need to be identified and addressed early on. So that collaboration across the three entities is really pivotal to the success of the implementation. And in addition to the project management, and Di did just touch on this before, DVE has worked with a number of technology vendors, so there's a lot of experience that we bring into these projects. We can share process efficiencies and best practice around successful implementations. This will be covered off a little bit later when we talk about some of those practical tips for a smooth implementation. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Danielle. That's great. Over to Richie now to talk about the Timeedit side of things.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Di. Well, on behalf of Timeedit, we'd like to thank the team at DVE for inviting myself and my colleague Joe to be part of today's webinar. I guess I'm here to give everyone a quick overview around who we are, what we do, and particularly for those that are not familiar with Timeedit. So as an organization, we are a SaaS company, and we develop and delivers to education institution the class and exam scheduling, as well as resource and room booking solution. So that covers RTOs to vocational and higher education institution. Now, background in terms of the company, we started our business some 20 years ago, based out of Gothenburg in Sweden. And in the last 2-3 years, we've been working with institutions across Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia. So at present, our products are currently in use by more than 190 education institutions globally. Now, in addition to class and exam scheduling, we've also recently acquired a curriculum management software provider based out of the Netherlands, and we're currently in the process of integrating that platform into our SaaS solution. We're also planning to release a new suite of class allocation and registration products due out later this year. So if you're interested, please feel free to hop onto our website, timeedit.com. Now, to provide more insights into Timeedit's project at ACU, I'd like to introduce you to our Director of Customer Success. I think he's introduced himself earlier. Over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Richie. And looks like we're perfect for time.
You are.
Plenty of time.
Di was going to give us the wind up, wasn't she, if we're going too long, but she hasn't had to yet.
Nope.
I guess just continue on from Richie's story. Yeah, we've been in region for approximately 2 years now. Our team's grown to 10, and that's across sales and customer success, which I think we believe is the biggest timetabling focused team in Australia and New Zealand, or in APAC. And I guess what we did when we started here was very much about growing a team that has local knowledge. We've hired people with industry experience who have been schedulers, who have managed scheduling teams and have really understand the challenges that schedulers face, as well as gone out and hired a team that have SaaS experience working with higher education. So I've seen how successful implementations are run, have seen how, you know, how we can improve and how we can adapt the Swedish model or the European model that inevitably TimeEdit had for 18 years to a local Australia, New Zealand and APAC model. And so we're very confident what we've brought on. The beautiful thing about having this very large team in Sweden is we've got experts that we can call on. You know, some of the team have had 15, 18 years of solving institution problems. So I've come across a lot of the challenges that our customers down here will face. And so we're able to ask them, you know, to give us some insights and use that. So as well as what we think is a very strong local team, we've got a very large European team and global team that we can pull from when we need experience. Throughout those last year or so, we think we've had a fantastic track record of delivering implementations. We've gone live with, if we include the two Singaporean institutions, gone live with 10 institutions. Lots of different models of how we go live, and you know, if required, feel free to talk to Richie and myself of how the model works for you. I guess, you know, there's a traditional waterfall model that we go start to finish, and there's other challenges that mean that we need to implement something else, or we need to migrate systems first versus, you know, looking at a more traditional scheduling model of collecting data and then scheduling. So what we think we bring and what we're very confident with is, you know, getting to that goalpost, getting a schedule out on time and hitting those timelines that really matter for the institution and for the students, is, you know, getting the timetable into people's hands so that they can turn up to class and continue what Di said, the A to G, make sure they're getting to that G. I think, you know, one of the questions that I read was, what's our normal structure? You know, normally we'd have an implementation manager who would be on the project all the way through and would lead the project as far as the custom configuration that each customer wants. A senior implementation manager who would oversee that and sort of help them with some of the questions that we have, or best practice when that's required. You know, we'd always go to some of those senior people in the team. And then as Danielle touched upon, a project manager that can allow our implementation managers to do what they do best and sort of build custom solutions and allow sort of the project management and all that other work that's so important to get the project delivered on time to someone who's an expert in it. And, you know, Danielle has been a great support in that. I guess the thing that we continue to hear more and more from customers and from the market is, you know, is the requirement for timetabling and a timetabling system to firstly help with good student outcomes, but also efficient resource management, as far as, you know, making sure you're utilizing your resources at the institution as good as well as you can. And I think probably the thing that we continue to hear and you know, during our implementations, it's very much about designing a structure for our customers that is unique to them. We're not hamstrung by our structure and the architecture of our system. So we can design a solution that is bespoke to each institution. And probably the key piece to that is it means that the system's able to change and is flexible and grow with customers. So, you know, I look at some of the customers that we implemented a year ago, they're already saying we're looking to change the way we do things slightly, and we're able to go in and make changes to their database, which for TimeEdit, I think, you know, the 20 years, that's always been one of the secret sauces, is that you're never done because your processes change. You talk about this, you know,
Yep.
You have to, the software has to support the business processes, and that means the software has to be flexible. And really that is one of the secret sauces that we believe we have. And that means that, you know, there's continuous work that we continue to do with even institutions that are a year old and are finding maybe we could do things better, or maybe we could be more efficient, and we're able to work with them. So that's really something that we find is, you know, required in a timetabling system nowadays, is, you know, let's not change the business process to meet the system. Let's let the system, you know, meet the business process and really challenge the system to do that. You know, being COVID, as we sort of launched, you know, one of the things we continued to hear was, I wish you were here before COVID. You know, that brought a lot of scenario scheduling, what happens if we go to this, you know, this sort of restrictions, and how are we going to manage that? And they're just innate things that are in Time Edit, you know, running a draft mode, running scenario analysis, and having that prepared without actually touching a timetable. So, you know, some of our features, I think, lend itself to the way that all institutions are going to run now. There are scenarios that you need to run. You need to be prepared for this to happen. And, you know, COVID's an extreme one, but there's micro ones happening regularly at each institution at a regular basis. And I guess, you know, the practical tips that I think, you know, that's one of the questions that we always get, Richie, the first few meetings we have with a customer is, you know, what are the learnings and what do we need to take into, and what are some of the tips to a smooth implementation process? And Danielle, I think you can talk at some, but I might talk at a few here as well. Is, you know, we really find, you know, a vision, and Di, you sort of touched upon this, of, you know, mapping your process and a vision on what you're looking to achieve. You know, when we walk in and having a institution tell us, this is what we're looking to achieve, this is what we want to do, and, you know, these are the pain points we had previously that we're hoping to overcome. That really helps us, because it's a great starting point. Technical people are obviously a big one. You know, there is a lot of data that we're taking on and manipulating or getting into a system, and it's really a shared sort of goal of us and the institution. So, you know, having people who can interpret that, who understand the institution and the way your data is structured, is something that is extremely important and helps a lot. The thing we call out is integration, starting them early, making them iterative. I think, you know, one of the things about Time Edit is it's flexible, so there will be some changes in the model down the track. We hope that not many of them will affect the integrations, but the fact is, you know, having that sort of agile mindset around integrations is, you know, the most successful implementations we have done that. You know, they're looking at, let's get data in and then let's enrich it and let's work down that process. So, you know, integrations, I can't say enough. Let's start it early so that it's not the thing that we're waiting on to go live. It's something that's already done and dusted and signed off and tested. And I think probably, you know, the last one before throwing to Danielle is what's really interesting is, and you all are well aware of this, is the internal relationships. You know, I think, you know, that help in understanding and how do we navigate. I think, you know, some institutions and ACU will talk about the way that they've done that, you know, are very good at understanding the way that we roll out an enterprise software. As you touched upon, Di, it touches everyone. You know, timetabling is something that, you know, almost everyone in the institution is touched by it. So understanding that and really getting, you know, user groups and making sure that we're keeping, you know, everyone informed is something that we find, you know, really, really, really important. But I think more importantly is it's different every time. You know, if it was a cookie cutter model, it would be very easy. It's not, because we're different people with different, you know, faculties and the way they operate. So that's really the other one that we find really important, is understanding how the institution works and them helping, and then us helping them to sort of keep everyone informed and updated and aware of what's happening. Danielle, what do you think?
What do I think? So I think preparation is a really key factor. Di spoke about that earlier in terms of preparing for change within the organisation. So I think the importance around that can't be emphasised enough. In my experience, the most successful implementations have been those where business processes are really clearly defined. The key stakeholders and decision makers have been identified prior to the project kicking off. Communication and training is being planned for, and that the organisation is really as ready as possible, or as ready as it can be, for the implementation and change that comes with a new system. Secondly is around communication. I think ACU is a really wonderful example of where strong communication has resulted in a smooth, with, I'm going to say, with minimal bumps, because you'll always have them. It's been a fairly smooth implementation, you know, with obviously some challenges along the way. In this particular example, we have regular workshops. We also make use of a Teams chat channel, and I know that's quite a sort of detailed bit of information, but that's actually worked really well for ongoing discussion and collaboration. And we've got a really regular cadence of governance meetings, and then we set up ad hoc meetings where it's required. So that communication is really critical to having, you know, everyone really on the same page and working towards the same goals. Availability of key stakeholders. And so, you know, that's really so that key requirements can be determined, we're turning decisions around quickly. And as we work through that sort of iterative approach of developing the system, it can be reviewed and updates made regularly, so we can just keep that moving along quickly. It also helps to keep the project activities progressing. And that availability of key stakeholders also includes senior staff for steering committees. So that's a really important forum that we have each month. And we need those key people in those sessions to make, you know, decisions and to look at the recent issues that are raised. So the stakeholders really should be identified, you know, ahead of that kind of project kickoff stage and engaged really early. And whilst, you know, there is the reality of juggling multiple roles during the project, freeing those resources up to really focus on the project and, you know, give it adequate time is going to have a huge benefit to its success. And then finally is, I think, having a really pragmatic approach. So the reality of any system implementation is it doesn't always go to plan. But I think approaching that reality in a very sensible and practical manner has far better project outcomes. We've seen that demonstrated really well at ACU, where there's a high level of control within the project, but there also is a level of flexibility to the organisational and project needs. So I think, yeah, that's my sort of tips from a practical sense.
Terrific. Thanks for that, Danielle, and thanks for your information, Joel. I think there's a couple of things that I just would like to emphasise before we switch over to Catherine. There is, in terms of the change management side of things, a really good model that we use at DVE that I'd just like to share with you. I call it it's actually based on a theoretical framework, which I have to find, but it's unfreeze, change, and refreeze. And so the unfreeze is, you know, preparing people, doing your as is and your to be process mapping, starting your scoping consultation, designing your requirements. People generally do that really well and understand it. Then there's the change. So people get that, system implementation. The refreeze is often the area that is left, well, I'm just going to say it, dangling. And people need to have ongoing communications post-implementation. They need to be informed about how the project implementation and outcomes have progressed, and they need to be trained in whatever new roles they're undertaking. And this model is a really useful one for any change activity, but particularly system implementation. It's particularly useful. And then secondly, I wanted to reiterate what Joel and Danielle have said about the process mapping. We do a lot of work with organisations where they don't understand the importance of process mapping. So you get a set of documents out of it, which is terrific, but actually the value is in the conversations with the people about understanding what your current state is and having those conversations around the table all together or online with the key stakeholders represented, including academic staff for timetabling. And really understanding, you know, what is the fear for change, because there'll be resistance, and unpacking that and addressing that right up front saves the organisation a lot of time, effort and money once the implementation gets started and the change activities commence. And the to-be mapping, as Joel has said, is designing your new state. It's really good to hear that TimeEdit is flexible for constant change, because all I'm hearing in the sector, and I just ran some more 8 wastes workshops this morning, is that there's constant change. It's about us at all times now. And we need to be constantly asking, why are we doing the things this way? Why? Get to the root cause of the problem. And so if you've got a system such as TimeEdit that enables you to keep questioning how you're managing your resources, people and space, addressing the workload issues as well, which this system does, it enables some element of that, you can really start to drill down into the fundamentals of resource management and become a really efficient organisation. And even though some people are often fearful of this because it means they might lose their job, the goal with most organisations that we've worked with is that they don't want to lose people. They want to put them on higher value add activities and get them out of the drudgery of process and task-oriented work. So bear that in mind when you're thinking about any system implementation, but particularly with timetabling. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Catherine, and she's going to speak about the experience at ACU. So over to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Di, and hi everybody. I'm very excited to be here talking to you today because this is hot off the press, our implementation, and we're really excited about it. So it's a good time for me to be able to share our experience with you. I thought I'd sort of start with the driver for us. So some years ago, we did a big piece of work that a lot of universities have done around journey mapping and looking at the student interactions with our systems and what that experience was like. And one of the things that became very apparent in that piece of work was just how important the timetable was to students. It's a moment that matters, and was the term that we used. It's pretty common term. What we found, students were anxious about the timetable. It was something that they wanted settled, and they wanted certainty. They also actually wanted to change, to be able to change, but it was really just a point in their journey and process where comments like they felt like a real student. The problem was really happening, and particularly
Catherine, I'm just going to interrupt for a little sec. We've got a bit of an audio problem, I think.
Oh,
maybe
sorry.
it's all right. Just
is that any better?
Just keep going, and we'll just see. Yes,
Okay,
need to be a bit closer to that.
So I've got your pictures over there. So if you can't, is that any better?
I think so. I think it's just about staying a bit closer to your audio source. Yeah. Yep.
All right. Let's see how that goes.
Yep.
Any better?
Yep. I think so.
I will keep going.
Yes.
Okay. So our project was we wanted to implement a new timetabling system. We had 7, I think, real purposes of that. We wanted to give staff an improved timetabling experience. We wanted it easier to use, and we were looking for some functionality that we didn't have in the product that we were using. We wanted something that was purpose and had some flexibility that we wanted to be assured that we could accommodate future business changes. We wanted to simplify the change request process. We realise and recognise that timetables really don't get static based, and there's always going to be some change required, and we wanted to simplify that process because it's very manual and very process. We wanted to reduce the effort involved in creating timetables. It was this great big thing. We produce a timetable twice a year for around the 2 major semesters that we have. And that was a huge project each time that we wanted to kind of normalise that activity a bit. Another area that we wanted was to be able to produce better and accurate timetabling reports. For all sorts of reasons, the timetabling team were being asked increasingly to produce reports so that there was some analysis done for a whole range of reasons, from academic understanding academic workflow to a whole range of other things. During COVID, for example, when we had to move something to online classes, we had to do reports around how many students we had. We have multiple campuses around Australia, and it was an enormous amount of work. So being able to actually understand what our students were doing and produce reports around that quickly was a thing that we were after as part of this project. And then we also wanted to reduce the need for IT support. We wanted a product that we put on the student administration, and we wanted to reduce our reliance on our IT department in terms of supporting the product that we have. And we wanted to improve the quality of our application paper. So we had a lot of objectives, and we're getting pretty close to delivering them. So we went live with, we started this project with that funding approved in March, and we wanted a new timetable for semester 2, which starts next week. And so
So-
we knew
We'll just
that
be
was gonna be very
clear,
difficult.
March 2023 and timetable semester 2, 2023.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. We like to challenge ourselves at ACU and just see what we can do. And we did go live. We did have to did divide the project into 2. So we looked at what we absolutely our minimum viable product to be able to function for semester 2. And then we had some second phase that we're working on now, and that will be for the timetable for 2024. And we went live on the 17th of July. So we were cutting it a bit fine, but we did it, and it's all in place now. So we were very excited about that. So yes, our project was approved to proceed, we got our funding approved in March of 2023, and our original schedule, we were planning to go live in June 2023. Like I said, we split it into the functionality into 2 phases. So the first phase will be the 3 kind of modules, the core, reserve, and viewer of it. Joel will quickly explain what they are. People who need to know the detail, but we did run into one snag, and so our June 2023 deadline had to be pushed back. And that snag was an internal problem. It was to do with our own the way we had integration with our class allocation software, and basically the way that we tried to do it didn't work, so we had to do the second way. We were pretty confident that the second way was going to work, and what can I say about that? Essentially, we had always planned to do it the second way, but because it took longer, we had thought we'd do an interim solution in the first instance, and we actually ended up putting in the more robust solution right from the get-go, and that took the extra few weeks that we needed, which is why we pushed the go live back to July. But that all worked, and it was just the time we needed to do it. And so we did go live in July, on 17th of July, as I said, and the sort of phase 2 was already well underway for the January go live for the rest of the delivery. In terms of what we're doing in the second phase, was rolling over the 2024 timetable. We actually did that as part of phase 1 in the end. We had an interim solution for programs of study, and we did decide for the change requests and adding new units. That was something we kept our old system to use for now, and that will be updated as part of our second phase. And the other thing we're going to do in second phase is just some additional integrations in terms of data like staff data and improved data and things like that coming across. I was asked to talk a little bit about project governance. I know it's been mentioned a little bit already. I think we have a good governance structure that we set up front. I was the executive sponsor as sort of the lead on and the person responsible for the timetabling at ACU. And we had a dual structure. We had an ACU steering committee, and then we had a steering committee made up of ACU people and time edit section people. So the steering committee that, the ACU Time Edit steering committee, from the vendor side, they had a project manager and a project team. We had our own project manager and our own project team. And we also had what we call a working group, and we had a small number of faculty timetabling officers as a kind of working group. Just in terms of language, we call them TLOs, timetabling liaison officers. They're the people in the faculties that actually, in the schools, who actually put the data into the system. So we have quite a large number of people who touch the timetable from the school perspective. And we got a group of them, I think about 12, if you're wrong, a fairly small group. They were sort of, we identified the ones that we thought would be really responsive and interested in the project. But we tried to get a balance of people across the different schools that we have. And then we had the ACU steering committee. So I was the chair of that, and the project manager reported into that steering committee. And we sort of had two groups of people there. We had senior users or representatives of the user group. So we had the associate director from my team who was responsible for the timetable. And then we had representatives from each faculty. And we deliberately tried to get a cross section of roles amongst those faculty representatives. So we had faculty managers. We tried to get we had heads of school, and then we had some team leaders as well. So we tried to kind of get a cross representation of the school structure, the faculty structure. And when we went to the faculties and asked people to be on the steering committee, we did get a bit of pushback in that all the faculties wanted their faculty manager to be on the steering committee as an example. But when we explained we were trying to sort of take a university view of timetable implementation, and we wanted this kind of different views. We wanted academic views as well as the faculty administrative staff views. The faculties came on board, and we did get a very good staff joining us. And then also on that steering committee, we had someone from IT. So of course, the system has to integrate with all the other systems that we have. So we had an associate director from IT, and we had the associate director from the student systems. So the student management system sits in my area as well, and she was there to really understand the implications of student data and environment. So that was our project governance layer. I created a role many years ago as a change manager within the student administration, because we have so many projects that we are implementing, and change management is just so critical. And as she always reminds us, it's not just about communication. It goes quite a lot beyond that. But having said that, communication is a really critical part of what she does. But beyond communication, it's really about engagement and maintaining and building relationships with the stakeholder group. So we had quite a lot of meetings. We had workshops, bi-weekly workshops with the ACU and the project team. There were weekly project management meetings between the ACU and the we had weekly stand-ups with the ACU team. We had steering committee meetings every 4 weeks, because of course, remember, we only started in March, so that was only 4 meetings, I think. 4, I think. And as I think Danielle already mentioned, we used Microsoft Teams for chat, for meetings, for document sharing, and the chat component in particular worked really well. I had access to that, and I could just see the chatter, and I didn't understand a lot of it, but I didn't need to understand a lot of it. What I could understand was it's fixed, it works, it's done, all of those things. But it really gave me, as as the sponsor of the project, a real level of comfort that things were happening, and that issues as they arose were being discussed and addressed, and it took the pressure off the project manager and sort of our senior project lead, from the practitioner side. It took the pressure off. It meant I stopped hassling them. It meant I wasn't going, what's going on? Is it happening? Is it working? And I could just kind of dip in and out. And if there was something that I was concerned about or didn't understand and wanted to understand, I could follow up with them then. So given how much time pressure they had, that was a really important component of the way that we structured the moment. In terms of our schools and our timetabling liaison officers, as I mentioned, we had faculty representation on the steering committee itself. We had regular email project updates to our school, our faculty managers, and to the broader group of timetabling officers. There was a fortnightly video conference with TLOs, and that was the channel to give project updates. It was also where once we had sort of the product in place, showing some demos so people can start to see what it's going to look like. There was product training. There was Q&A, of course, and that was really about taking the team on the journey with us, and just building some excitement about that change. And Di talked about that unfreeze and changing and the freeze kind of model, which I think is really important. That we didn't need to sell the idea of putting a new timetabling system in place. Everybody, I think the level of discontent with the product that we had was pretty apparent. So we didn't kind of have to really convince people that we needed to do something new. So there was support for the change. We didn't have to sort of sell that.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, we still, it was still new, and it was still a change, and people still had to get their head around the new system. And we're really conscious that people adjust at different rates. Some people dive in and get their head around it. Some people are busy with other things. Timetabling might only be one component of their job. And so they might not have the same amount of time to engage with it, or they might be sort of a bit further behind in their journey of engaging. So this was a way of kind of keeping some momentum, building some excitement about the project, but also giving some little teasers, some exposure to what the product was going to look like, some of the features that it was going to have, and then giving them the opportunity to play around with the system. And of course, it's still a new product, so people are still getting their head around how it works. But all of those little kind of bringing all of those TLOs along with us on that journey meant that once we went live, everyone just got stuck in and started to try and do what they needed to do. And the TLOs were involved in user acceptance testing. That smaller group of timetabling officers that we used sort of as our core group, they were involved in the user acceptance testing as well. So we think that we now have a new way of working. We've got a more flexible timetabling construction. There's more flexibility around the duration of activities, and we can link smaller parts of classes. One of the things I wasn't aware of until this project was that we had one of our schools was just working entirely outside the time, but they were putting a block of I don't know, 5 hours or something, but students had to be on campus, and then they were sending through the LMS where they needed to be and when. So they had completely stopped using our timetabling system because it didn't suit their needs. And that's problematic because, well, for a whole variety of reasons, but students had to go kind of into another system to find out what what they needed to do and where they needed to be. So we've got much more flexibility now, and we can bring those kinds of activities back into the timetable. We've got, we know that we can now roll a completed timetable, and it's going to be sort of a true reflection of the timetable we actually have, as opposed to rolling kind of something from a starting point, which I think is my team are pretty excited about. The cutover process that we will be doing is apparently going to be automated now, so that's you know, a big savings in workload for us. It's much easier to search for a room and book it. Another thing that's very important for us is we can manage different time zones. So we have campuses in Queensland and New South Wales, Victoria, and it's only an hour difference about half of the year, but it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary how complex that's become. So I'm very conscious, Di, that you're in a different time zone to us at the moment. So that's a huge win that we're pretty excited about. We use Echo 360 to record our lectures, and it's much easier for the schools to actually decide what goes from the time that we're through to Echo 360, so that the recording gets scheduled. So that's another neat little piece that we're excited about as well. I think I'll stop there, Di. It's been a bit of a...
No, it's terrific. Very interesting, Catherine. I'm sure that people will feel that as well. So we've got the Q&A function within this webinar. So please type up any more questions that you have through that, and or the chat, whatever's easiest, whatever works. And our team will keep an eye on those and respond to them. So if anyone has any questions, or I don't know that you can speak, but it's through the chat, type those up. I will just check in on a couple of questions that we received from people. I think we have talked about integration pitfalls, but were there any sort of specific elements in terms of lessons learned, Catherine, that you think if you were to provide advice to a colleague in another organisation, you know, make sure you did these top 3 things? Would there be some elements like, you know, engage broadly, have the governance set up, you know, that avoided pitfalls?
Sure. I mean, probably the first thing I would say is give yourself a bit more time than we gave ourselves.
That's right.
You know, as I said to my team when we did hit this integration snag, you know, they were pretty, you know, I said to them, we had cut ourselves no slack. We had not given ourselves any time for something to not quite work the way that we thought it would. And so as a result of that, when we did have to go to our sort of more long-term solution in terms of integration, that was that delay. You know, that wasn't a failing on the part of the project team at all. It was a failing on our starting today. And so, you know, with any project, you should have a bit of contingency, so because something won't, you just need time to explore how something works. And you have a few choices that you can make in terms of how you might do something like integration. And you kind of want to test them out. And we hadn't given ourselves enough leeway to do that. So while I'm sure I can just see Richie going, I see you implemented it before, you can do it too. And yes, you can. But if you don't have to, give yourselves a bit, you know, just a little bit of a buffer. You need a contingency in terms of funding, and you need a contingency in terms of funding. So that would be the one thing. Setting up the governance up front and communicating was really important. And like I said, I did have a bit of pushback from the faculty in terms of who they wanted to be represented. But when we explained our rationale, they were actually pretty supportive. And getting that right was really important.
Yeah.
And then I guess the third thing is that, you know, taking taking the stakeholders on the journey. So there's always this temptation to, you know, to squirrel away and work and work and work and then go, ta-da, here's this amazing thing. Actually, I think that if you want your stakeholders to have some ownership and to really engage with something, particularly in software that we put in the system, you know, showing them, not sharing every detail, but showing them what you can show them as you go through the journey, and you know, it generates ownership, it generates excitement, and I just can't tell you how important I think that is in terms of change.
That's terrific. Thanks for that, Catherine. Hopefully, Craig, that's answered your question. We have a question about providing a demonstration of the software. We don't have that planned for today, and hopefully we didn't imply that in our objectives of our promotion of this, but we are happy to set that up and email you all and set up a follow-up session to this with a demonstration. And I'm speaking for Richie and Joel here because I'm sure they're dead keen to give a demo.
Yep, very, very keen to be able to showcase Timeedit to yourselves. What I'll do is I'll get in touch with Di, and then we'll organize it by DVE.
Yep, and we'll let you all know the time and date for that. Now, we had a couple of questions that came up through the Eventbrite registration about class transfers, and I just wanted to talk specifically about that. So we had one from David, how to handle transfers between classes of the same unit subject but at different times. And then another question from Brendan, which was about, I think probably more about class preference systems. Say what you want but get what you're given, or having real-time class registration, pick what's available. So they're probably actually two separate questions, but they're about class specific information. Who would like to put their hand up to answer that? Richie, Joel?
Yeah, just going to suggest maybe, Catherine, you might want to speak on behalf of the ACU context, and we can provide an update from a Timeedit perspective.
Yeah, so we use Allocate Plus as our class allocation tool, and students can self-service in that, and we upgraded that just not that long ago, and students can actually swap. There's a swap feature that we available for, which is really terrific. It's thousands of students use it. Or they can contact us basically, or their school administrative staff.
You faded out a little bit there, Catherine. So did you say that their class transfers can occur?
Yeah.
Yes, terrific. And the question about, where was Brendan's, the class preference system, the real-time registration? That was.
So we shifted to a preference system a few years ago, and it has made a huge difference. That was our server load couldn't cope with all the students trying to get online at the same time to get into the classes that they wanted, and they have adjusted. It didn't take very long for them to understand that with the preference process, they have a period of time to put in the preferences. They don't have to be in the system right away, so that made a huge difference for us. And our main proof that really works is the number of student complaints about the timetables and down about zero.
Oh, that's terrific. Yeah.
Which has been a huge improvement. It does require, though, that the timetable be in place. I mean, if the schools start changing the timetable after the timetable has been published, that's still problematic, and that's but preferences works to answer the question. But I would say that the more stable the timetable can be when students get their exposure to it, the better.
Thanks for that, Catherine. We've got another question for you from Leanne. Hi, Catherine, you talked about the student experience and the feedback highlighting what they felt was important. This implementation, whilst it impacts on internal stakeholders, such as academic teams, etc., have you also continued to engage with your student body through implementation? And if so, how have you gone about this, please?
Oh, that's interesting. So we made a conscious decision to not engage with the students with this because we took the view that it's a back-end system, and what the students actually see hasn't changed. And so we put quite a lot of thought into what we might tell students. And I think where we landed was nothing. And because we wanted, it was all a back end change. When we changed the allocation system, we consulted students quite a bit. But with this one, we didn't, because from the student perspective, they were not going to see anything too different. There's some new features that they'll start to see, but we took the view that they will engage with those as they see them available. But we actually, we didn't. We decided quite consciously to not make it a big deal for students.
Interesting. That's a good perspective from back-end system. Thanks for that, Catherine. Keep typing in your questions, folks. We've got the Belinda asked, what problems were you trying to solve? I think you talked about that early on in your discussion, Catherine. Why time edit over all the other platforms? There you go, Richie and Joel, little bit of a plug.
How long have we got, Di?
2 seconds. 30 seconds, 1 minute. Why
I'll make a comment if you like.
Yeah, go, Catherine.
That's more valuable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, cost and fit were the sort of the two, in terms of the way we timetable as an institution. We've got complexity, as I mentioned, in being multi-state and multi-campus. And I have to say, we were very encouraged by the speed of the development and Timetable's willingness to become an onshore vendor. I mean, one of the things that we were with any software that we are working with, we really think about the Australian presence, the support that we can expect, and so on. And we found Timetable being responsive in terms of establishing themselves in Australia.
Terrific, thank you. There were a couple of questions about reporting. So generating insightful reports. Is the reporting side of it, has that been of benefit to you, Catherine?
It's still, I think that's a phase 2 thing for us. So it's coming. Yep. What we've seen, it looks really exciting, really simple. Very simple, and quite kind of what all of the things we could think of that we might need were available. So we're going to implement that in phase 2. So we should have that by January, and we're pretty excited about that.
Thank you. Another question for Catherine. What was the software system ACU was using before the implementation of TimeEdit?
I don't really want to answer that question, but you can use your imagination.
And you can contact Catherine privately. Meg asked, how are the universities with a flexible academic calendar navigating the number of additional intakes while providing a clash-free timetable? That might be a question more for TimeEdit.
Yeah,
knowing about other unis.
We don't have much of that.
And I'm assuming that question refers to an institution running multiple academic calendars over the same period. TimeEdit is flexible to be able to support that. We can schedule classes across trimester, semester, terms, business school, and whatnot. And because everything resides on that same continuous timeline database, you're able to schedule classes against those unique week patterns, either by associating local resources or shared resources across that same database as well. Outside of ACU, we do have customers that run it across 3, 4, 5 academic calendars. So that's quite common in our world.
Thanks for that, Richie. We had a question about space. It wasn't really a question, but understanding a bit about space optimization practices. Does that come into consideration when your clients are thinking about a timetabling system, Richie and Joel?
I guess it really depends on where timetabling sits within the institution. If you look across institution in Australia, New Zealand, a small percentage of institution would schedule within property services, and hence KPIs of ensuring that space utilization needs to be as per TEFMA standard would be upheld. The way that we ensure that your spaces, your resources are fully utilized is by our scheduling engine. We do have constraints or constraints profile associated to our auto scheduling engine that will actually encourage the ability to use your resource up to a KPI that you define. And obviously to gauge outcomes and outputs, reports will support the ability to do that. Something that we'll be releasing soon is a module that institutions are able to use called demand analytics. In essence, it is a module that supports the process of data collection during your timetabling process. And using demand analytics, it will be able to advise the institution whether they've got sufficient resources at the start of that entire scheduling process, rather than reacting to the fact that you've scheduled all these classes with no spaces to be able to assign to, for example. So again, as part of our presentation or demonstration organized by DVE, we'll hopefully be in a position to show you some of what demand analytics could offer. Yeah,
that does sound exciting, Richie. It enables organizations to plan better.
Exactly.
Just a side question from my perspective, noting our mixture of audience here today from a variety of organizations. And we have as our case study, ACU being a reasonably large university. Is TimeEdit scalable for smaller organisations, for private providers, the higher ed providers who maybe only have, between 50 or 2,000 students or RTOs?
Yep, definitely. In Australia, for example, our smallest customer, again, small doesn't mean that their timetabling process is basic. They can be complex as well. We do have a customer base here in Australia that's got 500 students. So again, if there's a requirement for class scheduling, timetabling, TimeEdit's able to address it.
Oh, that's terrific, because a lot of those enterprise systems for the university sector are not downscalable. That's the right term for higher ed providers. And DVE works with a lot of those and helping them with their compliance arrangements, and we struggle to advise them with enterprise systems that they can afford, clearly lots smaller budgets. So that's good to hear. There was a question about compatibility. Were you able to speak about that, Richie? Compatibility with government cloud systems?
Yeah, I saw that question, and that was submitted by a Singaporean-based institution. The good news is, yes, TimeEdit complies with the Singapore government hosting requirement. I think that's what they call it. I believe our Singapore representative, Trevor Fong, is on the call. So more than happy for Trevor to reach out to that particular institution to provide more information there.
Excellent. Now we talked about, there's a question here about cost and timeline. I think cost is a side conversation. Oh, actually, I'll first of all go to the question online here. Hi, Catherine. What is the key factor ACU selected TimeEdit as the university timetabling system over other systems?
So we did a procurement process. We had a solutions architect outside of student admin, an IT person, do a market scan and do some analysis. I think we came up with two products that kind of fit the bill in terms of the functionality that we were looking for. and then the differentiated and then was cost, and that, well, cost. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Now, I just want to talk about the timeline a little bit, because I think the ACU example is fantastic as a fast turnaround time from design to implementation. I want to hear from TimeEdit if that's the norm, or if you have a more averaged implementation time, bearing in mind that probably the journey often would take a little bit longer.
Yes, the journey normally would take a little bit longer, and I think we probably have three models that we're accustomed to implementing. We have one which is we don't necessarily need to schedule the first time around, which is what we did with ACU. We want to migrate reservations and then have it in as the source of truth, in TimeEdit as the source of truth, and then the next cycle after that do the scheduling. So then collect data, and so that can be, to go live can be relatively short, because there's a few modules that aren't used, but also that's normally the one we implement where we have tight deadlines like this, and it makes sense for us. Yep. The normal, I guess the other way is very much following the flow of scheduling. So collecting the data, then making changes to that data and preparing it for scheduling, and then scheduling. That's typically longer to go live, because you're going through a lot of the process of it before. And the other one is probably the hybrid that Richie and I talk about all the time, which very much looks at what module do you need when, and it can be very iterative. So we have lots of different timelines. And again, I think it's very hard to say. There's some, I look globally, there's some that it can be 6 to 8 weeks to go live, and it can be a couple of modules and we're done, and that's fine, and that's what they had in their tender. The others can be, I think Catherine, we've got 5 or 6, so that's probably medium size for us. Some can have 10 modules of TimeEdit, and each of them add time to it, and probably a year or a little bit more. But then we can run it concurrently. So I guess it's a bespoke solution for every institution. Mm-hmm. But it really depends what you're looking to achieve and what you're looking to replace. Remove some of the complex auto scheduling and it gets a lot quicker, but it's only fit for purpose for those that aren't accustomed to using it.
Excellent, thanks for that. Something that I've seen in the work that we've done at DVE around the process improvement side of things is that often the faculties, colleges, schools have quite a number of timetablers. So I've seen 2 models actually, quite a lot of timetablers managing the timetable in a faculty, or like some universities, one timetabling god or goddess who knows timetabling inside out, and to some degree, might have been considered a risky situation in past. Does the do people have to reconsider their roles and responsibilities when the timetable, the review of roles and responsibilities, I know, goes par and parcel with the project, but what's the sense of when that's achieved, the implementation, how their roles have changed? Are people relieved that the pressure is off and that their work is easier and it's become more efficient? Is there a sense of relief for that, or how do people feel? And probably more from TimeEdit perspective, from other partners, other implementations.
Yeah, I regulate. I work as much with ongoing relationships with our customers as implementations. So very, very regularly we talk about, well, this would have taken hours or days to do in our old system, and some of those are, immediate improvements that they see once they implement the system. So very much, I think as you look at, the new wave of technology that's coming through, as it's trying to, as you say, automate those repetitive tasks that you were doing previously, and trying to alleviate that pain point. So yes, I hear it a lot. And a simple one that we hear regularly is about, previously I'd turn on the old system and I'd have to go get a coffee and then come back, and now I've lost my coffee break time because it's SaaS and it's in the cloud and it's all those things. So even simple things like that can happen. Yeah,
that's terrific. Great to hear. We have another question from the audience. Hi, Catherine. Interested in hearing about any automation features in TimeEdit and a high-level explanation of how they work.
That might be a bit beyond me. I know that they exist because I've heard my team talking about it, but I would be just making stuff up if I.
All right. Well, we won't let Catherine make it up just for this minute, but perhaps Joel or Richie can help out there with some automation features.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Richie, jump in. I think the main one that we talk about is an autopilot. So essentially, what that is doing is in the data model is setting up constraints and setting up rules of how we want to schedule. And then, as Richie touched upon, setting up what we call a constraint profile. So how do we want to apply those rules to, we call them activities, something that is due to be scheduled, and then put it through an autopilot, and that could be tens, hundreds of thousands of reservations. Normally isn't that large, it's probably in the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s. And then it is applying those rules that it is scheduling. So taking an activity and automating out that in theory before auto scheduling, you'd be doing manually. But time edits, I guess, history is also from manual scheduling and the changes that you make, and the simple thing of once the timetable is out and I now have to change a room or have to find someone else that's free, is those sort of automation become as important when you're manually making changes. So we have a number of features built in. We have some that will automatically choose, the room. So let's say that I'm looking for a room, I've got some criteria on that, and it will automatically choose that room as I'm looking to take a reservation, or tell me who's free so I can book a lecturer. So there's automation built into various stages of it. And again, these are the things that we'd love to understand the use case or the examples that you're thinking of, and show you how it would work for you, because that's probably the fun bit for us to go through. Richie, did I miss anything?
Yeah, no, I think you've covered the key elements of it. The other benefits that we hear from our customers, informing us why they're able to, manage the timetabling process in a much more efficient manner, is the fact that while there is that process of data collection, scheduling, draft review, change management, and publication, if you were to refer that process against what legacy systems are out there and how they're managing it, they're all done in silos, in essence. Hence, that there is always a need to synchronize data, and then the data gets out of date, and there are issues, and so on and so forth. Within the time edit world, every modules, those processes, all sit on, again, that continuous timeline database. So as you're collecting data will be submitted. Once it's submitted, it's made available to the scheduling engine there and then. So from a scheduling process perspective, it's more about focusing on the business process, less about the technology, because the technology supports that process and supports it well. So yeah, those are the key benefits there. Yeah.
No, it's great to hear. And my other question is the ease of use. So for people who are timetablers, is it how hard or easy is it to learn to use time edit?
What we're hearing, if I can jump in there, is the staff are finding it great. I think the initial reaction was it's just so much simpler. I think now that they're getting stuck in this, they're trying to do things, and some things are a bit different that they need to get used to. But overall, the staff are the feedback that we're getting is they really like it. They find it intuitive and easy to use. Just in terms of what you were saying before about the sort of team structure, that's one of the things we are considering now. Actually, whether we have as part of this project, and we have to identify stakeholders, we really are looking at how many people do we need to engage with, and we got far more people than we realised, and far more people than the faculties realised. Like the executive deans on your good one, she thought she had about 4 people worked on the timetable, and we said, well, we've got, I don't know, this is 35 people have access to the current timetable that we have. So that's actually generated a conversation around, now that we've got the system in place, what's the staff structure around it, and what should that look like? So that would be the next kind of piece of work that we'll probably do is we consider how many staff we need to work on the timetable across the university.
Yeah, the roles, the people side of that 4-element model is so important, and that it does affect roles and responsibilities. Now we have 10 more minutes, but we have addressed all of the questions, I hope. that were submitted, either through this questioning or also through our presentation. Is there anything else that anyone in the audience would like to know about? This is your last bell call to put up a question. Or does anyone on the panel have a question of anyone else at all, or any other feedback or commentary that you would like to make? No, so no questions, and we've covered off on everything. We will now put up our slide with our offer, and we will also keep in touch with you, and with TimeEdit organise a demonstration of the software, seeing as you've asked. Oh, there's another question here. Hi, Catherine.
Yep.
Thank you for the great discussion. Are there any changes you would like to see on TimeEdit?
I think we've pushed TimeEdit pretty hard, and they have been wonderful to work with and have been very responsive. So I would say not right now, but I'm pretty sure in 6 months we'll be talking.
And I guess that actually raises a good point about constant evaluation and checking in and updating. So is that part of your process, Joel or Richie?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Di. We have fortnightly catch-ups with our customers, and every quarter are catching up with the executive sponsor to try to understand where priorities have changed, what is happening in 12 months' time that we can start to plan for. And I guess this is talking about that continuous improvement. I always feel that software is not one and done. It's about that continuous improvement. So firstly, it's about hearing the pain points and being able to address them, because there will be some. But secondly, it's about building on what we've got now as a base and making it even more fit for purpose. So when hopefully Catherine and the team look back in 2 or 3 years' time, when the contract's coming to an end, they can say, well, it's a no-brainer to renew it because we get so much value out of it. And I think, that's where the real value is. It's not just walking away and saying who's next. It's about trying to build this, which we have with ACU, this healthy relationship where we challenge each other. They challenge us to be better, and we challenge them if we see better processes happening in the market, saying, have you ever thought of doing it this way? And that way we get to a better outcome for all.
It's a partnership at the end of the day. Yeah.
It is, and I think that's a bit of an unknown when you're making a choice about which product you're going to go with. I think procurement processes don't. It's usually an aspect of a choice, but it's quite hard to quantify. But it certainly has been. One of the things that has made us most happy about the choice that we made has been the partnership it has been a true partnership, and we're very pleased with where that's standing. Is there another question?
There is, yes. So hi, Catherine. You have a brave and hardworking team. Kudos. The flexibility TimeEdit app offers, whilst amazing, did you or your timetable team have concerns over this, i.e. training the team and faculty or processing methods? And do you worry about heavily customizing the system to your processes should you pivot? While TE cannot commit to the future, will customizations be upheld? Asking, as vendors do try to standardize, and our institutions also like to change. So probably a few questions in there. First one is, did you or your timetabling team have concerns over either the training of the team and the faculty or the processing methods?
We did have quite a few discussions at the beginning. I mean, that is a real concern when you get a product that's really flexible. What controls do you have or want to have in terms of the users? And I think that's probably one of the things we're thinking about now in terms of the staffing and having a consistent approach across the university. We certainly didn't have a consistent approach before. And so one of the sort of side benefits that we were really looking forward to with this implementation was that we were going to train everybody to use the product in the same way. So we made some decisions about how we'd like to do that. Over time, that will start to get more challenging, but that's where we're kind of looking at having fewer people working on the timetable across all that number of schools or something like that to try and manage that and keep up contained.
Yep.
I don't think we had any customizations, but I'm making it up. But I think we certainly are trying to avoid customizations where we can. And again, the only other thing I would say is that you know, as we've gone through this process, I know the team have come up with ideas of what they think would work better, and it's kind of like what Joel just said. There's a sort of there's a two-way street there. They've told us where we thought we wanted it done one way, and there's been suggestions of doing it a different way. And we've adopted that sometimes. So I think that's probably all I have to say on that one.
Yep. No, that's terrific. Thanks for that, Catherine. All right, I'm going to draw it to a close now. We're nearly up to time, and we'll put up our offer. We're going to offer the first 3 organisations that contact us after the webinar's ended, if they would like a free consultation session with us about timetabling systems, processes and needs, actually a consulting advisory session. So get in and email Ina or the contact details in the invitation to get in with that. And we will also stay in touch with you to invite you to a demonstration of the software, which we'll do very, very soon. I think we could do that within the next 2 weeks, Richie, you think?
Yep, we'll definitely have a chat to organise that within the next 2-3 weeks. Yeah.
Yep, terrific. Okay, look, thank you very much. You've been a great audience, and very strange that I can't hear you, but I'm glad that you can hear us. And we've got the questions. We will stay in touch with you, and if you want any more information, you can contact us at any time. I especially want to thank Dr. Catherine Blythe. Terrific, really, Catherine, for your contribution as a working, ongoing, current implementation case study example. That's the best source of information ever, I think. Yep. And we appreciate the time taken today for your contribution to this. It's wonderful. And I think you've provided a lot of valuable information on the how-to of what a system vendor needs and what a consulting company needs. So thank you very much for that. And thank you, Joel and Richie, and Danielle. Team continues on in improving timetabling practices across the nation and the world. So I wish you all the very best, and we'll see you all soon at somewhere, sometime.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.